It ends up as this tissue fluid around, that's why I'm squishy. There's fluid around my cells. But then we have to go one more. After it leaves my cells, it then enters the drain line. So the fluid in the drain. We call that lymph. So you are lymph when you're leaving the tissues. We call you lymph. Where would you go once you leave the tissues? Where does the lymph end up? Let's look. So, here we are in my blood, where I start. I'm going to end up in my tissues, which is just this arrow over here. That's the fluid around my cells. I'm now going to enter these green pipes. That means I'm now draining away. I'm lymphing. Blah, 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 blah. All the arrows, I can do that. I want you guys to go. Arrow, arrow. Ooh, ah. Where do I end up? What is that thing on the right? Heart? What's this blue thing? A vein. So where did I go? I went from the lymph, ended up where? Just like that. My lymph ended up becoming fluid back in my vessels. They made a loop. It left my vessels to my cells, from my cells to my drain, from my drain to my vessels. It makes a loop. Make sense? So if I show you the whole thing in picture, that's what we're talking about. The fluid's going to leave my blood. After it leaves my blood and goes through my cells, it gets drained back toward my blood. Why waste the fluid? I can just use it again and again and again. Makes sense? All right. So I'm going to show you an animation of this flow through the lymph system that has these words in it. It's going to be relatively simplistic. Not meant to be, hardcore here.
The lymphatic system has two main functions. Its network of vessels, valves, ducts, nodes, and organs helps balance the body's fluid by draining excess fluid, known as lymph, from the body's tissue and returning it to the blood after filtering it. Some types of blood cells are also made in the lymph nodes. The lymphatic system also plays an important role in the body's immune system. Infection, even a trivial infection, is the most common cause of swollen lymph nodes.
We'll come back to that in a second.
Let's look at a cut section of a lymph node to see what happens. Afferent means towards. Afferent lymph vessels bring unfiltered fluids from the body into the lymph node.
Okay, before he gets going, let's see if we can figure out where he is. He's talking about fluid that's unfiltered from the body to the lymph node. So go back to my picture. I can spot that here. Here's fluid from my body entering my lymph system, right? Why do we need to filter it? He mentions unfiltered. Why should anyone care? What would happen if a pathogen got in that fluid and got in the drain? It'd go to the heart. Let's do that. I'm bacteria. Here I go. No one's stopping me. Here I go. Here I am. If the bacteria gets to there, where's the next place it will be? Everywhere. What do we call that when bacteria are everywhere in your blood? We call that sepsis. And it's called what? Death. Right? So the whole point of the system is whatever's in my fluids cannot end up in my blood. I just want the fluid, not anything else. So I'm going to have some way of making sure something can't sneak into the drain line and end up everywhere, because I will be dead in 24 hours. Right? So this whole system depends on the ability to keep that fluid from carrying a pathogen. Make sense? If you drink Salem water, you're actually drinking Salem sewage. Right? The water comes out of the river, they go to your shower, it goes down your shower, they then clean it and put it back. You're relying on them cleaning that sewage for you to drink it the next time. Right? You're never gonna drink water ever again. That's the logic. If I can clean it, you can keep using the liquid. If I don't clean it, you're gonna be dead. So he's talking about the way we can use this system and clean the fluid as we go. So the lymph system's job is to not only drain it, but make sure it's a clean fluid when it drains. Make sense? So he's talking about that unfiltered fluid. That's full of bad stuff. I don't want that bad stuff to keep going. I'm going to filter it or clean it.
Efferent vessels, meaning away from, carry the clean fluid away and back to the bloodstream, where it helps form plasma. When the body is invaded by foreign organisms, the swelling, sometimes felt in the neck, armpits, groin, or tonsils, comes from the microorganisms trapped inside the lymph nodes. Eventually, these organisms are destroyed and eliminated by cells that line the node walls. Then the swelling and pain subside.
He's good by 8 p.m. All right. All right, so now we're gonna have to learn that pathway. So if I'm gonna take the fluid and clean it up, by the time we have to know what the structures are that's gonna go through. So I'm gonna show you a different animation that's gonna walk us through the actual flow of the fluid. It has a little more detail for you. And we'll put some stuff on the board.
And Doug.
You'll be back! Emus, get goodbye.
In a nutshell, the lymphatic system is a drainage system that removes excess fluid from body tissues and returns it to the bloodstream. It's actually a subsystem of both the circulatory and immune system. The major purpose of the circulatory system is to bring oxygen and nutrients to body tissues and remove wastes. This exchange happens in the smallest blood vessels called the capillaries. Blood plasma containing nutrients moves out of capillaries at the arterial end of capillary beds, while tissue fluid containing wastes reabsorbs back in at the venous end. However, not all of the fluid is drawn back to the bloodstream at this point. About 15% of it is left in the tissues and would cause swelling if accumulated. This is where the lymphatic system comes into play. It picks up the excess fluid and returns it to the circulatory system. Unlike the blood circulatory system, which is a closed loop, the lymphatic system is a one-direction, open-ended network of vessels. Lymphatic vessels begin as lymphatic capillaries made of overlapping endothelial cells. The overlapping flaps function as a one-way valve.
One-way what? Hey, that word again. What was the purpose of valves in your heart? To do what? Prevent backflow. Do you want your sewer coming back up? No, you don't. So if I want this fluid to go away from my tissues and end up somewhere, I gotta make sure it can't reverse. So I better have some valving in here to keep that fluid going the correct way. So over here on the right, they're gonna show us one type of, there's more than one, of the valving.
Fluid accumulates in the tissue. Interstitial pressure increases, pushing the flaps inward, opening the gaps between cells, allowing fluid to flow in. As pressure inside the capillary increases, the endothelial cells are pressed outward, closing the gaps, thus preventing backflow. Unlike blood capillaries, the gaps in lymphatic capillaries are so large that they allow bacteria, immune cells such as macrophages, and other large particles to enter. This makes the lymphatic system a useful way for large particles to reach the bloodstream. It is used, for example, for dietary fat absorption in the intestine.
We'll learn that next term, just wave at it and say goodbye. We'll learn about that concept. But my ditch in my field just takes whatever's floating down the field will get in there, right? It doesn't select. So we have to then figure out a way to clean it before it gets back. If I'm just gonna let anything float on down. So here's this part
Just
now.
inside lymphatic vessels, the recovered fluid is called lymph. Lymph flow is enabled by the same forces that facilitate blood flow in the veins. It goes from lymphatic capillaries to larger and larger lymphatic vessels and eventually drains into the bloodstream via the subclavian veins.
Okay, she missed some parts there, thank you, but we gotta fill in some detail here. So she got it right, but she left some off. So we're going back to my picture. Thou shalt know the order of the lymph structures in order, thou shalt. So we're gonna start down here and list the things I would go through as I enter the lymph and get back. So flow of lymph, or parts of lymph, or lymph terms, or whatever you wanna call it. Lymph structures, good word. It's all part of that. So we'll say flow of lymph. So these are the L structures of this fluid draining. So on this picture, what's the first L word we're gonna enter? That one, a lymph capillary. So our first thing that we would enter is a lymph capillary. By the way, you should put the word lymph on front of it. You don't have to, but there's blood vessels, there's lymph vessels, and they're the same names. So if you just put capillary, you may find yourself kind of not remembering. So I always put the word lymph in front to make sure you know I'm meaning these ones. What comes after a lymph capillary? Let's take a look. Looking for L words. L words. Oh, there's some L words. So I start here, capillary. That is what? Lymphatic what? Collecting vessel or vessel. So the next thing up is a lymph vessel. It's called a vessel. There's no artery or vein word. You say vessel. Okay, so now I'm collecting or getting bigger. So I went from my capillaries, really tiny. I'm getting bigger, I'm collecting them. Vessel. Looking for L words, L words. Oh, here's an L word. What's next? Lymph node. Number 3.